So, once again, Tony Khan makes yet another special announcement incoming teaser tweet for this past Wednesday's Dynamite, which turns out to be Wembley pre-sale. Big whoop. But a day later than the AEW official Twitter announces RIC FLAIR has signed a multi-year deal exclusive to Tony Khan's promotion. November 2nd, 2023, AEW CEO Tony Khan today announces a multi-year deal with Hall of Fame and Nature Boy RIC FLAIR, who surprised fans in attendance and viewers at home during last Wednesday's AEW Dynamite show in Philadelphia, marking his historic return to TBS by appearing as Khan's special gift for the icon Sting. Now, the comedy here is that with this posting of the image on Twitter, nearly every single person who was replying was completely negative, and what a horrible idea it was. Let me tell you why. Hiring RIC FLAIR to AEW is a bad idea because it shows Tony Khan to be a total hypocrite. Well, just a few weeks ago, to explain why, while Khan was still butthurt over losing the Dynamite versus NXT ratings war that everybody knew he was going to lose anyway, he replied to a fan by saying, it doesn't matter what the fan said, it's something about Vince. Yes, Vince has allegedly used his power and influence to shoot a lot of shots. A jab at Vince McMahon's various non-disclosure agreements he's had signed for alleged sexual misconduct. I say alleged, there's loads of them. And then Tony Khan goes and signs RIC FLAIR to a multi-year deal. Now, the same RIC FLAIR who, after Dark Side of the Ring, you know, the one with the plane ride from hell, came out, was not welcome in AEW because of the following allegation.
RIC FLAIR was naked in a cape only, and then he decided to come back to the galley to get a Coke. And then he wouldn't leave the galley. And I couldn't move. I couldn't get away from him. He was spinning around his penis and he wanted me to touch it. He took my hand and put it on him. It was minutes.
Oh, and that's not the only public allegation against RIC FLAIR that's been claimed. So Shane Douglas, famously not a fan of Flair, of course, has talked numerous times of Ric's alleged sexual misconduct. None so more damning than when Shane had to interject after Flair had forcibly kissed John Laurinaitis' girlfriend on the lips, pinned her down, and then did the following in a crowded bar full of passive onlookers.
Wally McDaniel grabs my pants, back of my pants, and goes, "Leave it alone, kid." Flair had beeline to her. She's looking like this, and there goes Flair to her. But what happened next was so bizarre, I don't know how everybody else in the bar didn't react, wrestler-wise. Flair stands up over, lays her down, stands up over top of her, unzips his pants, pulls his penis out, and starts flicking his penis up and down over top of her in this bar. I went, what the fuck? I get up out of the thing, Wall grabbed me again and said, I said, "Leave it alone, kid." I smacked his head. I said, "The fuck I will." Rick is facing the front door, and Marty's laying on the floor. I come down, and I went, bam, as hard as I could, forearmed him and knocked him into the bar. And I can still see him, like, trying to pull his pants up, you know. But I looked around the bar, and parents everywhere grabbing their kids and going like this, you know, covering their eyes up and stuff. Obviously.
Now, although WWE did have to settle with the flight attendant, Flair has never been convicted in court, but neither has Vince McMahon, so the only real difference between the two is one has signed NDAs and one hasn't, even though there is a clear pattern of public and detailed accusations on both men that have been made public. Once again, Khan took shots at Vince McMahon for his alleged sexual misconduct, but with much fanfare hires RIC FLAIR, when he previously wouldn't because of alleged sexual misconduct. What makes this more galling is that Tony Khan and Warner Brothers Discovery refused to allow Jay Brisco onto AEW television because of past homophobic tweets he made over 10 years prior. Jay had long since apologised for the tweets and truly showed contrition and made an effort to further learn about why his words were hurtful. Didn't matter to Tony or Warner Brothers Discovery, of course, who waited until Jay tragically died in a car wreck. There was no fault of his own to finally acknowledge him on AEW television. And this is also the same Tony Khan who rejected hiring Bret Hart to help behind the scenes, a story that goes back to 2019 when Tony Khan was only interested in Bret if he was an on-screen character. So he wasn't keen on hiring legends back in 2019 as he is in 2023. Which brings us to age, and this is another complaint I see from AEW fans a lot because AEW seems to be hiring an awful lot of WWE rejects and older wrestlers whose best years are long behind them. A few have still been effective like Christian and Sting and Jeff Jarrett. Adam Edge Copeland is still up in the air because he's so new. Chris Jericho's best times in AEW were the first couple of years, and then there's the guys like Ric Flair and Big Show and the Hardy Boys and a bunch of others. AEW is turning into exactly what AEW fans don't want it to, TNA. A bunch of WWE cast-offs that get as much, if not more, screen time than the homegrown stars. And speaking of age and Ric Flair, once again, he's let it be known he desires to have one more last match because he wasn't happy with the first match, partly apparently because of the opponents that were there, and he would have rather have gone for a singles match with Ricky Morton. Let that sink in. His previous last match ever was a pathetic display with a dehydrated Reed drunk. Flair struggling to hold his fake world title around his waist, wearing a long t-shirt that looked like a dress. As he stumbled to ringside, then he gave probably the worst performance of all of human history in a wrestling ring. Then he passed out twice in the match, then celebrated like it was a great triumph. Now there are thoughts that he may want to wrestle again, and it sure seemed convenient for Flair to be gifted to Sting a couple of weeks ago. So will Flair turn on Sting and have Sting's last match in AEW as well? God help us if that is truly the long-term goal here. It's long been suggested that Flair would like to die in the ring. It seems that Tony Khan heard this and said, that can be arranged. Now, none of what I'm saying here should be taken as disparaging to his previous in-ring accomplishments from his debut to 2008, his real retirement against Shawn Michaels. He's still one of the greatest of all time. That being said, Flair is toxic. And beyond all the sexual misconduct and assault claims, he's been spending the years since his fake retirement tarnishing his own image, from screwing over promoters and anybody he can over money, publicly burying and falling out with everyone he can think of, drinking himself into oblivion, being brought back from the brink of death, and repaying the doctors and those who care about him by starting drinking again. One last thing. At least Tony isn't spending much, if any, of his father's money on bringing Flair in on this 2-year deal. And it is a 2-year deal. Ric Flair's energy drink sponsorship of AEW is actually covering most, if not all, of the cost of bringing Ric Flair into the company. So essentially, AEW are getting Flair for free, and in return, all they have to do is plug Flair's special energy drink. So, what makes it so special? Well, of course, it's
mushroom infused.